All right, my friends, welcome back to All Cars. I am John. It's time for another Motorweek retro review reaction. This week, it is the 1983 family-sized hatchback Comparo. Now, I've chosen this one for two different reasons. The first is it was recommended by one of you, my viewers, so yes, I do listen. I don't always guarantee I'm going to do it, but I do listen. And number two, this one caught my eye because it has the citation in it. And as you know, if you've been here before, I have a love-hate with the citation in all of the X-body cars. They should have been such an incredible home run, a possible renaissance for American automobiles, but ended up being, I think, the worst example of everything, mismanagement, everything that GM could do. And it's included in here. Now, I recently did a reaction video with the Citation X11. I think I did that 6 weeks ago, something like that. And that's the sportier version, so it'll be interesting to see it side by side in what I think is going to be the basic trim, but we'll find out. So, as always, I appreciate you being here. Grab your beverage of choice. This is coffee, by the way. Sit down in that comfy chair and let's take a trip down memory lane to 1983.
Motorweek is made possible by Lucas Oil, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, and TireRack.com.
Motorweek, television's automotive magazine, with your host, John Davis.
Hello and welcome to Motorweek and to another of our Motorweek Comparo car road tests. This time we're going to compare four family-size front-drive four-door hatchbacks with wheelbases between 97 and 105 inches, all members of what's called the international size class. Our contestants include 3 Orientals and 1 domestic. First off the block, carrying the General Motors X-Car banner, is the Pontiac Phoenix.
Okay, I've got to stop there. A few things. Number one, I just looked. I did not realize this was 26 minutes long. So I might be editing this down to be a little bit more manageable size. Number two, I know I misspoke and said it had the citation. It's a Pontiac. Forgive me. It's still an X-body, but forgive me. And then the other thing is, what interesting terminology, the international size. I don't know that I've ever heard that. It must have been very, very local around those, limited around a certain number of years. I don't personally remember ever hearing that. And then saying Oriental, that's correct. But in today's world, 2023, when I'm recording this, I don't know, that word comes across with a few connotations to me. It's just kind of interesting to hear it. Let's see what they say.
Next, Toyota's newest and biggest front-drive car, the Camry. Along with Mazda's exciting sports hatchback, the 626 Touring sedan. And finally, the car our staff voted best in its class last spring, the Nissan Stanza. Before we start, keep pencil and paper handy so you can keep score along with us. And the rules? Well, each of our 6 testers has 200 points to divide among the contestants. First, each person can award up to 40 points for appearance. Fit and finish, as well as styling, both inside and out, are what they're looking for here. 60 points can be given for practicality. This is our biggest and most important category for family-oriented cars. It includes how much a car costs and how much it can carry. 30 points per voter will be awarded for performance. That means both handling and acceleration. And another 30 points for braking. We'll be watching the tendency of the rear wheels to skid on these front-drive cars. Finally, 40 points for mileage, still an important car buying factor, particularly for a family car, even if there aren't any long lines at the gas pump at the moment. The winning car will be the one that gets the most number of points out of a possible 1,200. Got it? Then let's get started with the car that won our recent Motorweek Driver's Choice Award for Best Hatchback or Wagon, the smallest car in our group, the Nissan Stanza. We admit to being a bit partial to the Nissan Stanza. It was one of the first cars Motorweek tested over 2 years ago, and its clean, trim, plowshare shape hasn't changed much since.
So I kind of dig this car. I like the exterior styling. Yeah, there's this early 80s, I don't know, they're all kind of boring. You know, they're doing what they can with style, but for all the world, this thing looks like a Ford Escort to me. It really does. But, you know, it's handsome enough in its basicness.
The overall styling suffers only from the drastic downward slope of the rear hatch. Like most Japanese cars, body panel fit is flawless. Gaps between hood and fenders are uniform, with edges so smooth that the Stanza easily passed our Motorweek jawbreaker test, and it's a good thing, too.
Okay, I just want to say that rolling, I thought a marble down it, I was like, hey, that'd be pretty cool when I do reviews. But then having a guy there with his mouth open to roll a jawbreaker into, no, we're not going to add that one. But it's amazing how big those triangular rear windows on this car were. You know, going back to an era of different safety standards, how thin all the pillars could be. Again, not a gorgeous car, but almost delicate in places.
The only quality control problem with this Stanza, and with most Nissan products we've seen, is the paint. The finish was pockmarked with ripples or orange peel, marring the otherwise high-gloss shine. The cockpit of our Stanza was also familiar. It's roomy and attractive, even if it does look a bit Spartan. The twin bucket seats are comfortable, though a bit flat, with only adequate support. Instrumentation on our Highline XE model is the most complete of any car in the test. Coolant, oil pressure, voltage, along with fuel, speed, and RPM are all lined up in a neat formation. In the center dash, you get a simple radio and rotary European-style ventilation controls that work well through a multitude of vents. You'll need fresh air if you try and cram 5 adults into the Stanza. Despite advertisements that claim rear leg crossing room for 3, there isn't much room for the rest of our bodies. Our 4-doors rear doors were small, with high sills. There's anything but generous shoulder room, and foot space is also at a premium due to a high center tunnel. Cargo volume, though, is...
Interior, okay. I mean, I'm just not a fan of colored interiors like this, and we have to remember it's 1983, so that dash, I want to be critical of it, but I can't be. I mean, the thing that really bothers me is the radio looks like a complete afterthought that they stuck in there, and I find it interesting. They were talking about the HVAC controls with European-style rotary knobs, and it's so interesting because I guess at this period, we were driving American cars and starting to see Japanese cars, but not a lot of European cars, I guess, in our social circle. And so I've always thought of the rotary dials on HVAC as Japanese, not European. High liftover. I'll say that on the cargo here. Interior space, you know, what they call it family size. They're saying it's a little tight. It was a different era. You know, family size now is... you know, you need an F-150 to carry 2 people.
It's very good. Even with the split rear seat upright, our 4 bags were quickly swallowed. But in our test for optimal efficiency of space, the wide intrusion of the rear suspension towers kept our 2 biggest bags from lying side by side. Stanza power comes from an 88 horsepower Napus X engine with 2 spark plugs per cylinder for better fuel combustion. Accessibility is only fair, being compromised by the add-on air conditioning components. The AC, along with the 3-speed automatic gearbox we didn't request, helped push the XE's price from a base of $8,099 to our car's $9,059. Yet the Stanza was still the least expensive car in our group. That automatic transmission meant a performance disadvantage for the Stanza. A still reasonable passing time of 5.7 seconds from 40 to 55 miles per hour was 0.7 of a second slower than our 1981 test car. That also made it the pokiest of our Comparo car contestants. Likewise, a time of 13.7 seconds to accelerate from 0 to 60, a 500-foot on-ramp dash of 10.1 seconds at 53, and a 19-second 73-mile-per-hour quarter mile. all in last place. Our attitude on handling, however, was more positive. An average speed through our slalom of 42 miles per hour placed it in the middle of its competition. The power rack and pinion steering is fast and light, with only the normal amount of plowing understeer you'd expect from a front-drive car. And despite soft springs, the Stanza behaves admirably in an emergency, with no hint of rear-end twitchiness. In longer front-wheel drive models, that's usually a major shortcoming, as is the even more violent rear-end swing that normally occurs with premature rear brake lockup in panic stops. No problem in the Stanza. With only a hint of instability, halts took a brief 120 feet on average from 55 miles per hour.
I'm going to stop it there. Lots to kind of think about. No big surprise. A 1983 four-cylinder with 88 horsepower and a 3-speed automatic is slow. I don't think there's a surprise there. But they did mention soft springs. I hope they say something about how it actually rides. And I wonder if maybe they made that comment and they're saying it might be the best riding one, for like interstate travel and things like that. Overall, good results. It was neat and it was tidy. It wasn't sporty. Braking 120 from 55. There's no real complaints here about this car, except there are comments about the dash, about high sill, big tunnel, impeding foot space, and it feels slightly older than it is. I can't justify that with any knowledge of when this was redesigned, etc. There's a general sense that it's a slightly older platform than what they were expecting. But overall, it's handling very nicely.
The front disc rear drums were very hard to lock without Herculean effort. A good, well-proportioned system. The Stanza also had the smallest curb-to-curb turning diameter of the group, 35 feet. That also makes it the only contestant to fall within our acceptable range. There are two other areas where the Stanza excels. Wind noise is almost non-existent at highway speeds, with a low sound level reading of only 68 decibels at 55, a score matched only by the Toyota Camry. And fuel economy? Well, thanks to the efficient engine, the EPA rates the Stanza automatic at 27 city and 36 highway. Our 100-mile test loop produced a fine result of 33, just what it should be. So while the second time around we did find a few more faults with the Stanza, it still remains an outstanding car, and as the smallest and least expensive contestant, a bargain hunter's delight. An impressive compact package. Our next contestant is a new model that joined the Mazda 626 lineup of coupes and sedans when the car switched to front-wheel drive last January. Up a notch on our wheelbase scale at 98.8 inches, the 626 Touring Sedan. The sporty Mazda 626 in some ways is the most interesting car of the bunch. It passes itself off as a hatchback, but its slick shape reminds you more of European sedans such as the Audi 5000S.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. That profile looks like an Audi to me, which is not a bad thing. This is a handsome car. Again, not earth-shattering Alfa Romeo, but really neat and clean and crisp. And it's hard for me to put this in words. It looks more new than that Nissan did. And I like the 4 headlights. It looks more upscale. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. And I kind of dig that it's got the hatchback.
Aerodynamics obviously played a big part in the Mazda design. Mazda's quality of workmanship has come a long way too. We looked but couldn't find anything wrong with the flawless medium brown metallic paint or the body panels that fit straight in uniform from one side of the car to the other. The best fit and finish of our 4-car group, matched only by the Toyota Camry. For more of the sporty nature of the 626, just look inside. There's a wide, airy interior that features a long list of standard items, including a super comfortable and very supportive 10-way adjustable driver's seat. The long, thin dash includes a clear instrument pod that has a large half-moon speedometer and tach. Yet surprisingly, there's no readout for engine functions except for coolant temperature, a European trim we don't applaud. Another transatlantic touch is the logical placement of light and wiper controls on fingertip switches. You can reach them without loosening your grip on the wheel. But we did object to the inconvenient placement of the power window controls. They're way down and in front of the excellent manual gearbox shifter. The air conditioning system is also the weakest of our foursome, but at least the oscillating vents provide good blower distribution throughout the long cabin.
I dig this interior. I really do. I'm not sure. I think that radio is a little bit of overkill with all the adjustments. But I kind of dig this. I was never a fan of putting controls up here on either side of the gauges, but that you could flip it back and forth with a finger while not taking your hands off the wheel. That was pretty cool, but little cheap. If you saw when they pulled on it, it moved a little bit, just a little cheap. Always like the Mazda recirculating vents, but I don't like the color. I do love that it's brighter. It makes the car look more open and airy, I say. But I can't tell what color it is. I'm colorblind, and that, for all the world, looks goldenrod. I don't know. I like how bright it is. I don't particularly like the color.
The slick shape of the 626 has one other drawback. Headroom is at a premium. Yet the split rear seat cushion means boxier cargo has ample room in what is actually a rather shallow cargo compartment. Once again, our two biggest bags refuse to squeeze next to each other. Under the 626 hood lies a 2-liter, 83-horsepower overhead cam 4-cylinder that comes standard with a 5-speed overdrive transaxle. Thanks to Mazda's unique way of conquering emission controls, things look busier than usual. Yet most normal maintenance items are as accessible as any other car in its class.
You know, that's only 5 horsepower off the Nissans. I don't think this one, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't use dual spark plugs. But even though they said it was busy, that looked much cleaner than the Nissan one. The Nissan one, and I guess it was because they said the air conditioning lines, but that just looked like a mass. This looks a little more organized and things pushed out of the way a little bit. I think this is a cleaner engine compartment.
Starting price for the Touring sedan is a hefty $10,195, but this 626 only comes in deluxe trim. So with air conditioning and a few extras, it grew only to $11,295. That makes it the most expensive car in our test, but it was also the best equipped for the money by far. That price includes the first automatically adjustable shock valving on any mass production car. Controlled from dash-mounted push buttons, it gives the 626 Touring sedan a distinct advantage on any test track. Handling is very...
I don't know. For 83, that feels a little bit like a gimmick to me. But although it's bigger, newer, and they said earlier that it matched the Camry in terms of build quality, it's $2,000 more than the Nissan. I like Mazda, and I have a soft place in my heart for them, but $2,000 back then, it's more than 20%. Think about that. That's a hard value proposition there.
Precise, with only a hint of understeer. With power rack and pinion steering and aggressive tires, the 626 managed a very fast transit through our switchback at an average speed of 47 miles per hour, easily taking the best in group. Through our higher speed emergency lane change, the 626 is a model of stability, even if you do pay for its prowess with the harshest ride of all the contestants. A torquey engine and good gear spacing also contributes to acceleration times. Overall, they were second only to our V6-powered Phoenix. We find a 40 to 55 mile per hour passing time.
I just want to say, when that thing's coming from the distance right there, as it comes a little bit more into focus, not looking at the profile, but just dead on where you can't make out the individual headlights. I'll be darned if that thing doesn't look like a Passat to me.
Time of 5.4 seconds, quite reasonable for any 2,600-pound four-door. While the 626 has the smallest engine of the group, power comes on fast and doesn't fade till well above 4,000 RPM. But that does hurt longer runs. While its 500-foot dash of 9.5 seconds at 55 matches the Phoenix, the 0 to 60 time of 13.2 seconds and quarter-mile time of 18.4 seconds at 74 falls behind all but the automatic Stanza. But even though we found a few frays in the 626 performance, we couldn't find any in its brakes. Almost unnervingly short panic stops of 98 feet on average from 55 miles per hour put our Mazda heads ahead, not only of its three competitors, but most every other car too. Halts were straight with only a hint of swing, with good pedal pressure and no fade. Outstanding.
That's astonishingly good. I mean, granted, the first one they managed to lock it up, right? But it didn't really start swinging too much. 100 feet. That's fantastic. That's really, really solid. And the acceleration, it's better than the Stanza, but the Stanza had the automatic. And this is a bigger, heavier car with slightly less horsepower. Not a big surprise.
And if you're inclined to turn around, any reversal will take 37 feet of pavement, about 2 feet more than the Stanza, and in the middle of our four-car group. Like most of our contestants, the 626 Touring Sedan is a quiet car. Its 69 decibels of road noise at 55 miles per hour no doubt comes from its wind-cheating shape. The one area where we felt a bit cheated was in fuel economy. Despite EPA ratings of 29 city and 41 highway, our 5-speed could do no better than 29 on our urban economy loop. Not a good showing given such high expectations. So, the Mazda 626 Touring Sedan is hardly perfect, but its good looks, adequate utility, fine handling, and terrific brakes go a long way in concealing any warts. Perhaps that makes it the sporting life's high-price pick in our Comparo car road test.
You know, again, I have a soft spot in my heart for Mazdas, and I kind of like this. I kind of think it's handsome, but it leaves me a little unexcited. I think it's better looking, and I like the handling, and a lot of what they were talking about there on the track, it reminds you of how close Mazda was to being a sporty brand. And then they kind of watered everything down, tried to go head-to-head with Toyota and Honda, and then they went back to sporty with Zoom Zoom. So that's my overarching opinion of Mazda since the 80s. And now, of course, they're going for luxury. But it reminds you how close they were to really being kind of unique in, I think, in the Japanese brands. But when you have great EPA mileage, but you end up giving, 4 miles per gallon overall less than an automatic Stanza for $2,000 more, even though you're better equipped. And the car just leaves me a little cold. It really does. And that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, but just not excited about it. I can see myself choosing one, but I'm not excited about it.
Now, while you're marking down the scores on our first two cars, why not mark down our address too? Let us know what you think of our Comparo car test. Maybe you have some candidates of your own. Our address is Motorweek, Owings Mills, Maryland, 21117. That's Motorweek, Owings Mills, Maryland, 21117. Okay, now we come to the newest car in our group. Moving up again in wheelbase. At 102.4 inches, the Toyota Camry Liftback. The Toyota Camry liftback is, in our minds, the first Japanese model to seriously challenge Detroit's bread and butter middle-class car market. Its conventional look should make even the most conservative domestic car buyer feel right at home. While its boxy shape does look to us like it was done by a committee, it wins high marks for both fit and finish.
And it's so interesting that, first off, Camry, it's not a Camry, it's a Camry, that compare this to that Mazda, and they're generally the same, right? That 4 headlights, hatchback, but this, it isn't pretty, and Toyota never really strived to be styling leaders necessarily. They were criticized, rightfully, for a long time for being boring, but this almost looks a generation behind the Mazda to my eyes. Generally, it's the same idea, but the way Toyota did it looks far less elegant to me. It looks more cut up and more choppy and more, I don't know, just it doesn't do it for me. It really doesn't. But let's see what they say.
Our liftback's interior also makes few new statements. Yet again, it's a solid design with the living room feel so typical of U.S.-made cars. Seats are broad and flat with generous padding. Although the Highline LE version does contain a tachometer, the baseline Camry dash has only a huge speedometer along with engine coolant and fuel gauges. A center pod houses an excellent radio, a small storage cavity, and ventilation controls.
So I want to interrupt here, and I'm not sure what I want to say exactly. I love the seats. I love the grays and the lightness of it. And when you look at, the dark interior of that Nissan with an, afterthought of a radio. When you look at the Mazda, which I really liked, but that huge radio that was kind of garish, and then you look at this and you can see Toyota. This is, to my eyes, the most handsome and the most modern of the interiors. I won't say I love it because it's not exactly beautiful, but just big pieces of plastic and just not... I like it. I like it. I think it is by far the most modern look, and I can see why in 1983 people are like, well, I'm going to give up on my GM or my Ford. Let's go look at a Toyota. Clean. Really like it.
That airflow is aided by an extra row of outlets along the top of the dash that sends a breeze just under the rooftop for backseat occupants, a thoughtful touch. Rear seaters will also find generous headroom, unusual for a hatchback, and more shoulder room than its Oriental rivals, yet not as much as the Phoenix. Likewise, luggage space is also above average. Unlike the Stanza and the 626, our two big bags just fit between the suspension uprights. And with the split rear seats also standard, there isn't much you can't carry in a Camry.
And that's so impressive because it's a little bit bigger than the Mazda, but to me, everything they just said, like Toyota gave it enough headroom and a little bit more shoulder room. Granted, it's a longer wheelbase, so it's a slightly bigger car, but then good space behind the seat and enough space between the shock towers to put two bags side by side. Lots of really, really smart sweating the details. You can understand why Toyota went on to be boring good sellers. What a intelligently designed interior from what they just said. I'm not a Toyota fan, guys, and you know that. If you watch this, I respect them, but I'm more of a Honda guy. But that's really impressive.
Comes from a single overhead cam, 2-liter electronically fuel-injected 4-cylinder rated at 92 horsepower. Again, second in class only to the Phoenix. Toyota calls it their lightweight, advanced, super responsive engine, and it comes with an adequate 5-speed manual gearbox. Maintenance accessibility was the best of the group. Cost for this domestic pretender begins at $8,048. Our modestly equipped car was $10,222, second in price only to the much better equipped Mazda 626. Unfortunately, the Camry generates a much lower level of performance than the 626. While it may be a fine family car, Camry handling is a huge disappointment. Is it like U.S.-made cars? Well, it sure is, but it's like those made 5 to 10 years ago. Excessive body roll.
That is one of the most strict things, I guess, that I've ever heard from them. They tend to gloss over everything and find soft words to use to criticize. So that's strong. Wow. That disappointing, and like an American car from 5 years ago. That's unbelievable. Look at this. It's like a freaking sailboat. That's again, maybe that pays off in highway ride.
Front end plow, a lazy suspension, and a widely trailing rear end ensured that the Camry's average slalom speed of 41 was way down at the bottom of our group. It would have been even lower without the engine's more than ample torque. Fortunately, emergency obstacle avoidance isn't quite as incompetent. The Camry never comes close to being out of control, as the rear end continues to grudgingly follow. It raised our overall opinion on handling at least to the acceptable level. As expected, however, straight line performance was much better, with a 0 to 60 time of 12 seconds, only slightly less than the Phoenix and well ahead of the Stanza and 626. Engine power is mid-range, making long-legged jaunts almost exhilarating. A 17.7 second quarter mile at 74 miles per hour was over a half second faster than any competitor. But you pay the price for that top end. There's less power where you might need it in everyday driving. The Camry's 40 to 55 passing time of 5.7 seconds tied the automatic Stanza for last place. Over 500 feet, the Camry was slower than all but the Nissan product, with a time of 9.7 seconds at 54. In perspective, however, a respectable result for a family car. But we find the Camry's power front disc rear drum brakes far less respectable. From 55 miles per hour, panic stops were a very long 156 feet on average.
Oh, that thing takes 50% more space to stop than the Mazda. Really, for Toyota being known for manufacturing excellence, and people liking to say, well, their stuff's really good because they use proven technologies, this was really underwhelming. In fact, the fact that it started to swing and it looks like they had to let off on the brake, a little scary. That's a really poor showing, honestly, for what I thought was going to be kind of the runaway hit here. Interesting.
We also experienced intermittent front wheel lock and more rear-end swing around than any of the other three hatchbacks. Turning circle curb to curb is 37 feet, the same as the 626 and likewise judged slightly oversized. However, Toyota's fine use of sound insulation gave it, along with the Stanza, the best decibel reading of the lot, 68 at 55 miles per hour. Plus, the Camry should take a lot of the marbles in fuel economy. With an EPA rating of 32 city and 44 highway, we were most impressed with an economy loop result of 35 miles per gallon. Mighty good for such a peppy mid-size car. So despite what we would charitably call very mediocre handling and disappointing brakes, the Camry's fine craftsmanship, large interior, and superior fuel economy will make it a tempting model for the traditional U.S. car buyer.
I'm going to say that is a car built for the test drive. Okay? Priced somewhere under the Mazda, but more than that Nissan. It's bigger than both. I think a nice, clean dash, comfy looking seats, most powerful, possibly the most advanced engine, best gas mileage. most rear seat room, great cargo room, and generally speaking, it looks like it would be competitive during a test drive. You're leaving the dealership, you're driving to the next stoplight, you're driving down a 45-mile-an-hour road, handling really well. And with competitive, lowest or next to lowest decibel readings at 55, it would come across like a quiet car. Now, it's not great. 68's good, but not, we don't need to jump up and down about it too much, but solid. The other things they're talking about, the handling, emergency handling that the Mazda would excel at, you're not going to experience that in a test drive. And similarly, emergency braking, well, you're not going to experience that on the test drive. Those are things that you wouldn't really know until later when you're driving down your subdivision street and you have to jerk the wheel, or, you have a panic stop or something like that. Later. It's not something that would come up in a test drive. This was a car designed for the test drive, designed to hit these big factors of space, cost efficient, open, airy, high quality interior, quiet. Ooh. But not terribly impressive when it's compared back to back.
Our final entry has the distinction of being the biggest and oldest of our group. We first saw it as an early 1980 model in the spring of 1979. With a 104.9-inch wheelbase, it's the venerable, much maligned, but as you'll see, still very viable Pontiac Phoenix. We have to confess we had some misgivings about even including a General Motors X body in our Comparo road test. We thought this trend-setting front driver might be getting a bit long in the tooth to be competitive, and its checkered history made us overly wary of problems. But in fact, we found fewer negatives than we expected.
The Phoenix, I think it's interesting. They were thinking whether they should include one or not because it's a little old, but it's only 3 years old at this point, and it's checkered history. That's fair, and I'm glad they brought it up. But you look at I think, overall styling and the wheel arches and just, more slab-sided, I don't think it's quite as attractive. Certainly as the Mazda. I don't think it's quite as attractive as some of the others. And I'm not a big fan of the Phoenix. First off, I didn't like the name. But the grille area and just two headlights, I don't know. It just doesn't quite work for me. I thought the Citation was better looking. Overall, this looks a little slab. But it's okay. I mean, again, this is a car that I just think it should have been a home run. And if GM had gotten it right, it could have been. So I'm super excited to see how it compares back to back to back. Let's see.
Its body style is still current and suffers only, as do all but the 626, from a sharply sloping hatch line that mars the overall well-balanced look. But what really displeased us was the dull paint finish and widely varying gaps between the doors, both back to front and side to side. Fortunately, there were no such gaffes on the inside. Velour-draped door panels and seats were by far the most expensive looking of our four contestants, and there wasn't a bit of plastic wood to spoil the view. The broad front buckets have generally flat cushions, but also enough lower back support to delay the pain of even day-long trips. The driver is also faced with a sparse instrument cluster that provides little except speed and fuel data. While an optional gauge package can be ordered, our car contained only a row of idiot lights above four well-positioned center air vents.
Really disappointing interior. At least the radio's not turned vertically. But, part of it's because it's Pontiac, two big, clusters in front of you. But overall, it looks for all the world like GM reached over here and said, well, what radio do we have? Well, let's just stick it in that slot right there. Oh, Well, just take the HVAC controls from something else and stuff it right here. I mean, sure, it's not sized to fit. And literally, you know, it looks like, well, just screw it in. We don't care what you put there. The seats look wonderful. And honestly, the door panels look relatively upscale. But the dash, I think it's hideous. No other way around it. I think it is absolutely atrocious. The lowest effort they could put in to build something, to design something that was easy to build and manufacture for as little money as possible. Really, really, really disappointed.
In general, the Phoenix had fewer conveniences than the other cars in our group. But where it really counts, the Phoenix came through. It has more usable head, leg, and shoulder room, front and rear, than any competitor. The longer wheelbase also means wide doors for easier entry and exit. And if you lower the single-piece rear seat back, the Phoenix takes on the bottomless pit nature of a station wagon. Even with the seat up, cargo space is very generous. Our two large bags were easily accommodated side by side. By far the biggest cargo carrying car in our test.
So in terms of what they just said about interior space, fitting passengers, and fitting suitcases, cargo, this is part of what makes this whole car so sad to me. GM, for all of their management, middle management, engineering, and manufacturing, and cost control dysfunction, they saw where the market was, and they went right after it. And they basically hit those check boxes, right? We need plenty of space for Americans. Big, and this is really clever to get that cargo space as deep as they did and wide, mostly by just making it bigger. Really smart in terms of how they utilize the space. Oh, so close to being a good car, a great car.
And just in case you want to try for the Guinness Book of Records, the Phoenix luggage bay will hold up to 9 unsavory characters. Again, more than any other. Other advantages and disadvantages of our Phoenix included a fine optional 112 horsepower 2.8-liter V6 and a performance suspension package. Alas, we also got only a 3-speed automatic gearbox. While the most powerful engine compartment of the lot, it's also the most difficult to service, with the 6 cylinders rear plugs a real nightmare to change. With the group's least standard equipment, the Phoenix LJ's $7,690 base price quickly climbs to $10,176. Yet while over $1,000 more than the Stanza, it's still a bit less than the Camry and far less costly than the 626. Thanks to the V6 and the beefed-up suspension, the Phoenix did quite well in our performance test. Through our slalom, its average speed of 42 miles per hour matched that of the Stanza. Actually, it would have done much...
I know what it looks like. Directly from the front. Looks like a Rover.
...better if it hadn't been for the tires. Even with less chassis understeer than all but the 626, the tires rapidly scrubbed off speed at every turn. It was also no surprise that with its much larger engine, the Phoenix LJ had good overall acceleration times. Its quarter-mile romp was 18.4 seconds at 75 miles per hour, along with a 500-foot dash of 9.5 seconds at 55 miles per hour. However, these results were almost matched by the smaller, less powerful 626. But with lots more low-end torque, the Phoenix had a clear advantage in a 0 to 60 race. A time of 11.7 seconds was some 11% faster than the 626. And a 5.2-second time to rise from 40 to 55 miles per hour was also clearly best of group. Just think how it might have gone with a 5-speed. But how about stopping the Phoenix? How would we find this X-Car's often suspect braking system? Well, on our car at least, all went fairly well. Although the brakes were easy to lock, panic stops from 55 miles per hour averaged a short 124 feet and were generally straight to boot. The rear end of the Phoenix had far less tendency to swing around than the Camrys. So all in all, it's not a bad system for such a long front-wheel drive car. But the Phoenix did take several booby prizes. For instance, turning diameter. A curb-to-curb measurement of 39 feet is right up there with full-size cars. In addition, the uneven door gaps help produce 71 decibels of wind and road noise at 55 miles per hour, considerably noisier than the 3 Japanese hatchbacks. Then there's fuel economy. Despite an EPA rating of 22 city and 34 highway, we never saw better than 26 miles per gallon. But we must also admit that's not bad for a 2,825-pound V6 automatic.
So, very interesting. I wanted to let that play because one thing I have said on the channel, and I have believed this since probably the late 80s, Americans needed to use V6s to get the performance that the Japanese could get with a 4-cylinder. And this pretty much says it for me. Sure, it performs a little bit better, but I think the Camry did like 0 to 60 in like 12 seconds, and this got 11.7. Not a substantial improvement in performance for having to move to the V6 and have the penalty in gas mileage. So you get the worst gas mileage, slightly better acceleration, noisier, and that would be measurable. You would notice that if you drove, say, the Camry and this, you would notice that 3 decibels. And that braking, I mean, they're downplaying it, saying it's slightly better than the Camry. That would be scary. You know, if you were driving it, that would be scary. So this doesn't really do anything 3 or 4 years in, doesn't really do anything to change my opinion of the fundamental flaws of the X-Body cars. But I'll have my final thoughts where I rank these. Stay with me.
So despite a lot of early misgivings, the Pontiac Phoenix X car is a worthy hatchback competitor. It's certainly the roomiest of the lot and can deliver the most power. And that's an important point if you like to take to the open road towing a small boat or trailer. So as a total package, it can at least hold its own against all comers. There you have it, our 4 5-doors. Time now to open the envelope and figure out our scores. See if you agree. For appearance, fit and finish, and style, the hands-down winner was the Mazda 626 Touring Sedan with 82 out of a possible 240 points. Its sleek lines and goofless assembly placed it well ahead of the boxier but extremely well-constructed Toyota Camry. The orange peel paint of the Stanza and the uneven door gaps on the Phoenix didn't get them many points. Next, our most important category with 360 points, practicality. Here we've got a surprising winner, the Pontiac Phoenix. Its 112 points came from well above average head and shoulder room and its very wide cargo floor. As for tested price, it was more expensive than the Stanza, but cheaper than the Camry or the 626. At first glance, performance may not seem to be an important category for a family car, until you have to swerve and pull away from an emergency. Superior handling was the key here, and the Mazda 626 had it, which gave it 62 out of a possible 180 points. The fine handling of the 626 was matched by its braking. It stopped extremely short and straight. Add another 72 of 180 points for the 626. From our road test, it should be evident that rear-end swing during panic stops is an unfortunate way of life for most front-wheel drive cars. Last but hardly least, mileage. Here, the Toyota Camry and Nissan Stanza split the first place honors with 77 points each. The automatic Camry recorded an outstanding 35 for best of group, and the 5-speed Stanza 33. The manual 626 was a disappointment, though. It only got 29. The V6 automatic Phoenix came in about as expected at 26. Figure out the winner? Well, it was a clear favorite in 3 out of 5 categories. The Mazda 626 Touring Sedan. We were impressed with the 626, enough so that we'll be giving it a long-term road test. We'll have more reports on it during the coming year. But the real surprise is second through fourth place. By the numbers, it was the lowly Pontiac Phoenix, followed by the Nissan Datsun Stanza and the Toyota Camry. But with only 7 points separating them, we call it a three-way tie. Proving that even though our gang preferred the sportier 626, the candidates in this very popular car group are very close in design and execution, letting buyers know that whatever his or her personal taste, they can't go very far wrong. We'll see you next week on Motorweek.
Really, really interesting, and very, very interesting. The Phoenix did as well as it did. I'm not surprised it wasn't last, actually, because it is the biggest, and with them putting a lot of emphasis on the usability of it for families and for cargo, that starts to make a lot of sense. And again, the whole X-Body platform just, it makes me angry and breaks my heart a little bit at the same time, because like I said before, GM knew where the market was going. They needed a competitor for the Accord, and they designed this, and they generally got the outline right. They got the high points, and then they just blew it on everything else. But what would your ranking be? And I find this very interesting because I could pick any of these cars and justify it. For example, if I wanted something that was a little more expressive and a little sporty and highly, well equipped, it'd be the 626. But it's the most expensive. And I'm going to give you multiple answers here, but I'm going to break it down at the end by how would I actually look at it back then, and then a little bit of knowing what I know now. So the 626 is the easy one. It's great looking, and I think it's got a great interior and the best performer. The Stanza is the bargain, and it's smaller, and again feels more like a Ford Escort competitor, but that's the bargain. And I would lean towards the bargain rather than the premium, because the 626 is the most expensive of all of these. And so that leaves the Phoenix and the Camry. Now, back then, if I had been old enough to buy a car and had the income, we were an American car family, period. These upstart Japanese imports, they didn't do it for me. I knew one person, they had a Accord, and I would have bought American. And so the fact is, I probably wouldn't have bought the Phoenix specifically, but if I was in that place in my life with the money and I needed to buy a car, I would have walked myself into a GM dealer and come away with something just like this. Not the V6. I would get, certainly the 4-cylinder. I'd be cheap, right? I'd buy price. 4-cylinders get better gas mileage, but I'd probably get an automatic. I don't know. I used to drive manuals at the time. So I almost certainly would have walked away with an X-Body car. But fast forward a few more years, when I'd started to be exposed to more Toyotas and more Hondas and some cool Mitsubishis and people who raved about their Nissans or their Datsuns. And that Camry honestly represents, I think, the best compromises. It's big enough, it's comfortable, modern dash, efficient engine, good space back there. So if it was 83 and where I was in my life and my mentality in 83, if I was old enough to buy it, I would have gotten a GM. There's no doubt about it. GM card, heck, my first credit card was a GM card. But later, a few years later, I began to appreciate the careful construction of Japanese cars, and I would have bought the Camry. No doubt about it. And I will go back to what I said earlier, which is it was built for the test drive, to feel right. And its weaknesses you wouldn't have really known about unless you watched a review like this. So that would probably be me. Honestly, I hate to say I probably would put the Mazda at the bottom just because it was so expensive, but the Mazda and the Stanza, I can make a different argument for each one of them. And then at the top, it depends, honestly, on where I was in my life. And at the time, I trusted GM, and very little doubt I would not have walked away with an X-Body there. But that Camry, I understand why somebody would look at that Camry and be like, well, that's the answer right there. It does hurt me I will finish with, I wish there was a Honda Accord here, but they were doing hatchbacks. I guess that's why they didn't have one, but I would have liked to have seen how a Honda Accord would have done here, because I think it would have been, neck and neck, somewhere between the Mazda and the Toyota, possibly. Let me know what you think below, guys. This is a long one. If you made it to the end, comment below with your list, what order you would buy these in, and I appreciate you sitting here. Have a good one, guys.